Welcome to the Game Night High School Football Podcast, a weekly review of all the local high school football games set to be played this weekend. The Game Night Podcast is brought to you by Sun Orthopedics of Evangelical. Hit refresh and get back out on the field. Now we turn it over to our hosts, sports editor Kurt Ritzman and lead sports writer Todd Hummel.
Hello and welcome to Week 16 of our Game Night Football Podcast. I'm Kurt, this is Todd.
Oh, we're really going AM voice today. Hello, we are finally to the state finals.
Yeah, state finals week. Kind of how we expected, Southern Columbia against someone.
And it looks like it's going to be Wilmington this year. Last year, well, it doesn't look like it is going to be Wilmington, who they played last year and beat 48-0. Not a whole lot of problems in the semifinals with West Catholic. Jumped on top of West Catholic early. Both teams exchanged punts to start, and then after that, the Southern defense kind of took over, gave the offense a short field. Gage Garcia ripped off a 67-yard touchdown run to make it 7-0. And honestly, from there, it was kind of all Tigers. The defense played really well. Obviously, that quick start was key, though, and I talked a little bit to Julian Fleming about that quick start.
Oh, yeah, we knew we had to jump on them early. We had to come out hot and execute because, they got a lot of playmakers and everything. So we figured if we could come out, stop their running game, make them pass a little bit, we'd be set.
Scott Dudinsky and I had the game on in the office, and, it seemed a few times that Southern's offense didn't look as good as it had earlier in the season. Did you get that sense from actually being at the game, too?
It was kind of like they were human for a little bit, I think. It probably wasn't Stone Hollenbach's sharpest game at times. They were, I think it got to 21-0, and they kind of 28-0, sorry, early in the second quarter, and then they didn't really do much. The offense didn't do much afterwards. Missed some plays in the passing game. Hollenbach missed some throws. There was a couple drops, and then the defensive line, the defense for West Catholic was pretty good in that second quarter. Used their quickness, really stopped the running game. Gage Garcia ended up with over 160 yards, but they were a little disappointed with how they played in that second quarter, and I talked to Gage a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We got relaxed and we got dazed a little bit, and we weren't getting a push, and that's something that we can't do going into next week. We got to fix that, and hopefully we could push and go hard the whole entire half. So,
how big was it to jump on them like that, though? Up quickly, 14-0. Obviously that's something you want to do. Try and take them out of the game quickly.
It's huge to go up by a score, and we went up 2 scores, and just being able to go up on a team is something that is really great in a game like this. That makes the other team kind of start to shut down, start to get flustered, and we start putting more and more points on. So.
One of the other things we noticed, we just looked up and we saw number 3 running with the ball, Nate Crowell, because Gavin Garcia went out with an injury. Have you heard an update on him yet? Actually,
no. I go out to Southern Columbia after this to talk to the Tigers. But Coach Roth said after the game that it was a concussion. They didn't know if he was going to be available, but they seemed to be pretty comfortable with Nate Kroll there. That's what would happen is Kroll would go to halfback. They'd move Max or do the same thing when Stone got hurt. Move a linebacker move back Max Tillett back to outside linebacker and throw sophomore Wade Kerstetter in at inside linebacker. So they're prepared if Gavin doesn't play. It does take away some of the big playability from the Tigers in the running game. But. I talked to Jim Roth after the game a little bit about Ty Rodermall. It was in the notebook. He broke a 58-yard touchdown or 51-yard touchdown run and ran away from some people. So, maybe fullback Ty Rodermall, the fullback gets a little bit more involved. But the way this team's playing right now, it's all going on the offensive line. And I talked to Senior Oak 6 about how the line is playing.
It was just executing and being physical with these guys. They rely on their speed a lot of the time, so we knew if we were going to be physical with them, that we'd be able to dominate them the whole game, and that's pretty much what we did for the most part.
What was that first drive where it take a little bit to adjust to that speed?
It was just the opening game jitters, big game.
Yeah.
And then after that, I think we just got ourselves together, became composed, and
guys feel it was kind of a little bit of a letdown there in the second quarter when it came out a little better in the second half there?
Yeah, it was. I think we just got a little too excited with how far we were up at the time. But, we definitely picked it up the second half, which is nice. Came out and scored early. Scored 2 big touchdowns early and then just put them away from there.
This is going to be 4 state title games for you, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Is it, when you start a career, I mean, obviously, if it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen here. But was that in the back of your head at all?
When early on?
Early on in your career. I mean, that was a possibility.
I mean, the first year I came out, I didn't think anything of a state championship. But when we got there, it was amazing.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was always the goal from there on out. It wasn't like that we knew we were going to get there, but that was always our goal. That was always our goal.
Now, you've seen Southern more later in the season, but a few times during the season. It seems like after every game the past 2 or 3 weeks, Coach Roth is saying that's the best the offensive line has played. Have you seen significant improvement from the playoffs, or from early in the season to the playoffs now from that group up front?
Yeah, and I think it was more. He talked about consistency. We talked a lot in our early season and before the Mount Carmel district game about they had to replace. That was the one place they had to replace some guys, and then Seth Pletcher became eligible. I think week 7 or week 8, and that kind of put the line into disarray again because Lear Quinton had been playing that spot. And they moved, they like to go one way. So they moved Lear back to defense and put Seth Pletcher back in at left tackle. And I think that's a big thing with an offensive line, obviously, is continuity. And I just think it took a couple games for, everybody to get used to each other. And, they've really been rolling, since, probably through this entire, especially these last 2 state playoff games between York Catholic and West Catholic, and it's going to be interesting to see. That's probably where the big matchup is going to be when we get into this state playoff game.
I just think we talk about Southern just differently than we talk about our other teams. They finally got rolling in the playoff games, but you look at this through 15 games, almost 4,600 rushing yards. Almost 9 yards a carry. I'm trying to do quick math while I'm talking.
Yeah, it is a little, and it is a. They expect a different level out there at the offense, from the offensive line, and they did roll through the middle part of that season, but again, that's the way they rolled through the Heartland Athletic Conference. I think there was probably still some question marks about that line until they played Mount Carmel again, because that was the season low, was that Mount Carmel game in the second week of the season, and once they were able to get the running game going against Mount Carmel, they've been rolling ever since.
Anything else you want to touch on from the semifinal?
Not that I can think of, sir.
Okay. Let's talk about the West semifinal.
Okay.
Wilmington, Steel Valley. So I'm following along on Twitter while I'm doing my work at the computer. Steel Valley was without their starting quarterback and with 16 players, no starting quarterback, and Wilmington was able to pull away. I think it was 6-6 for a while, and then Wilmington got a couple touchdowns to put it away.
Well, their defense played real well in that game. Okay. The only touchdown for Steel Valley in that game was a punt return touchdown in the first half. I think reading the story from our sister paper in Newcastle, I think Wilmington allowed 11 total yards in that game. So, with the way Wilmington plays offense, that it looks like they just basically wore down Steel Valley. Most of their touchdowns came late in the game. I think there was 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to kind of pull away. And, that just Steel Valley was just, with 16 guys, they were a really good football team, but it couldn't help but get worn down. They did a real good job. Wilmington did a real good job against that running game. Steel Valley was looking to have 2 rushers, with decent games, go over 2,000 yards for the 2,000 yards for the season, and that obviously did not happen against that Greyhounds defense. And that's probably going to be one of the more interesting matchups in this state playoff game. Is this Wilmington defense struggled a touch at the beginning of the season, gave up 31 points to Farrell, who's in the Class A championship game. That's their only loss of the season, but since maybe the midpoint of the season, they've been really rolling defensively.
Okay. We're going to dive into the state final, Wilmington, Southern Columbia, Friday at 1 p.m. at Hershey Park, after a quick break where we hear from our sponsor, Sun Orthopedics at Evangelical.
Whether it's time to live it up on the field or in the backyard, there's always time to play. The sports medicine team at Sun Orthopedics of Evangelical understands how important movement is to you and your family's life. With 4 convenient locations, the experts at Sun Orthopedics explore every treatment option available, from simple braces to advanced surgical techniques. They support you through the entire healing process, making sure you're back to being a warrior every weekend. Sun Orthopedics of Evangelical. Hit refresh and get moving again.
All right, welcome back. So, any reason to not think that it's going to be a Southern romp again in the state final, same as last year?
Well, it was 48-0 last year, and it's just amazing to me that if you look at some of the numbers that Wilmington has rolled up is pretty similar to Southern. I mean, they're averaging 47 points per game almost. They've scored 661 points. They like to run the ball. They have 5,000 yards on the ground. You would think in a normal year, this is probably a pretty interesting game. But the Southern team has been so much better than everybody else. And I talked, you watched the game on TV, and I talked about it last week. I think because he's from around, because we talk about him all the time, and he's from around here, how good Julian Fleming actually is believe it or not, kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And it's when you see him matched up against these schools out of the area that, he's such a difference maker on both sides of the ball. And I just go back to that first Mount Carmel game where they've really stopped Southern from running the ball. And the biggest difference in that game is they were able to throw the ball to Julian Fleming and score in ways that Mount Carmel can't. And I think that's the biggest difference in this game probably. If Wilmington's able to play the defense that they've played throughout these, last week against Steel Valley and stop the Southern Columbia running game. Wilmington does not have the passing attack that Southern Columbia does if Southern stops their running game. And that's probably where the biggest difference is coming in, because Southern still hasn't allowed 1,000 yards on the ground yet this season. Still 934 yards after, allowing -7 yards last week to West Catholic, and now there's bad snaps sprinkled into there.
Sure.
But there's bad snaps sprinkled into there, and most of that yardage came against the second team defense too. And the run defense has been so good, and teams don't throw at Julian that you look at their passing numbers, 1,364 yards, that's less than 100 yards per game too. And the other side of that, between Cadelin at safety, Shane Miller, and Jake Davis, the other cornerbacks have played so well. They have 21 interceptions too. So I just find I think this is going to be a pretty tough matchup for Wilmington and until this is easier said than done, until somebody figures out a way to slow down Julian Fleming, I think it's going to be pretty tough to beat a Southern team that's as balanced as this is with, 2 1,000-yard rushers. Tyrone was up near 700 yards, and then you throw in that passing game. It's just kind of a tough matchup. Wilmington likes to run. If you watch any of this, watch huddle film or any of that stuff, Wilmington's, there's not going to be many wideouts for the Greyhounds. Even if they spread you out, it's a lot of bunch sets. I didn't see a lot of guys out wide on anything I watched. Not a very big line, but they're very athletic.
Okay.
Going to pull like to pull the guards a lot. Watch for number 50 if you get a chance. The Ramirez kid. I think he's 215 pounds, but he beats a running back down the field a lot, and he's one of the guys they like to pull. And if they're going to use one of their biggest guy is Colton Richards, who is their 270-pound guard, and it's kind of funny. He's also their middle linebacker, and to kind of see a 270-pound guy move around like that's pretty interesting. Again, it's going to be Wilmington's going to have to control the ball with that running attack, kind of keep the Southern offense off the field, and hope they don't run into that. The juggernaut, the first quarters that some of these teams have, it's 28-0 before West Catholic got untracked last week. Your Catholic played well for a while, but it was already 21-0 when they got things under control. So that's the biggest thing is avoiding that onslaught early from the Tigers.
You talked to the Wilmington coach this morning. How did he seem? Does he feel like Did he seem confident? Did he seem like, hey,
Well,
we've got a chance?
You look at this crew at Wilmington, and this is like probably their best crew of kids that they've ever had out there. And this, I think you have to have confidence if you're Wilmington. I mean, the way that game started last year, they ran into that problem. Southern was up on them early, and the game just got away from them. If they can get a couple drives early, kind of control the clock, I think they feel they have a shot in this game. And I don't think you can go into a state final I don't think you can think that way just because you've rolled over so many teams. I don't, and you can't get a read on film about how good Southern is. You're not going to know till you get on the field. They were on the field last year, but you got to think you have a shot. You think last year's got away from you, and you think you have a shot this year. And they probably this is like that Mount Carmel team. It's going to be kind of sad that a team this good is kind of going to get lost in history to this Southern Columbia team because again. Just looking at Wilmington and there's not much difference between Wilmington and Mount Carmel. Strong defense, great running game, rolled over most of the people on their schedule, but they just didn't have the balance to match up with Southern Columbia. I think just looking at some of these numbers, and watching some of it, I think Mount Carmel's passing game was probably a little better this season than Wilmington's, and I just think they don't neither. I'm not sure Wilmington has the balance to hang in for 4 quarters. I said this all three games. They probably, if they play well, have a chance to hang in for a half and make it interesting for a half. But I think Southern's just too deep and too good to kind of not to pull away late. Bless you, by the way.
Thank you. Excuse me. So you think the best chance for Wilmington to make it a game, run the ball, grind out some first downs, maybe an early touchdown, maybe get ahead? I mean, Southern has come from behind.
Well, yeah. Well, the other part of it is Southern turned the ball over in the rain a couple times against York Catholic. Turned the ball over once last week. That's another thing you're going to have to do is probably force some turnovers. And have lost 13. They've turned the ball over 18 times this season. I mean, it happens. It's just avoiding the onslaught and. The other thing that kind of gets lost in the shuffle is as good as this Southern Columbia team is, I don't think they've looked past anybody yet this year. It's not like the Tigers have come out and started slow in any of these games. Even maybe Central, where it was tied, but that's also the first game they played without Hollenbach when Hollenbach was injured, and we're breaking in Zachman at quarterback. They scored 28 points in the third quarter and pulled away anyway. Sure. So. It's just a matter of avoiding that early attack by the Tigers.
We're breaking this game down. People should watch. People should go. Friday, 1:00, Hershey Park Stadium. But when it's 3:15 and Southern's posing with the trophy, are they going to have won by more than 35? That's my question. Maybe, come on. I think a running clock by the end.
Actually, I'm thinking yes, just because we haven't mentioned this. The state record for points in a season is 860, and they need 50 to set that record to get the 861. So, maybe if they have that shot at that, maybe that's what gets it into the mercy rule. I'm thinking that, Wilmington's coming out, thinking that not letting that happen again. I think it's a proud senior class. Cameron Merritt is 1,700 yards rushing. Robert Pontius, the quarterback, is thrown for 14 touchdowns, one of the top safeties in 2A. I think this is a proud team. I think they have something to prove to themselves and to the Tigers from last year.
56-14.
All right, there you go.
You can read Todd's prediction in Friday's paper. Also in Friday's paper, what are you going to have? Game preview, a column, his pick, story about the Southern Columbia seniors.
They're going to talk to Oak Six and Troy Donlin making their 4th appearance in a state playoff game.
Is it Troy?
It's Troy.
Okay.
I called him Trent.
Okay.
And I apologize. To Trent and Troy. Because it would annoy me if everybody called me Ryan Hummel.
And then we'll have full game coverage. Todd, Mike Bullock, and Rob Ingalls are going to go down there. So make sure you guys check that out in Saturday's paper. Then Monday we'll have a state championship and whole season maybe wrap-up notebook. Then looking a little bit ahead, our All Daily Item Football Stars will run in Christmas Day's paper. And we'll be back next week with our first winter sports podcast. And I'm sure we'll spend a little time looking back at the state final.
I was going to say, it'll be basketball season next week at
Yeah.
this time. Yay!
It'll be basketball season is, 3 hours after the state final's over, basically.
Well, that's true. Don't mention that, please.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next week.
See ya.
Whether it's time to live it up on the field or in the backyard, there's always time to play. The sports medicine team at Sun Orthopedics of Evangelical understands how important movement is to you and your family's life. With 4 convenient locations, the experts at Sun Orthopedics explore every treatment option available, from simple braces to advanced surgical techniques. They support you through the entire healing process, making sure you're back to being a warrior every weekend. Sun Orthopedics of Evangelical. Hit refresh and get moving again.